Are we?
So starting Perek Yud Gimel, page 13, page 167. Gula al Yidei Chilonim, redemption through secular people, in quotation marks. I have to stress that there are two primary Haredi objections to modern religious Zionism. The first is that it violates the Shlosh Shulos that we discussed in chapter 6. And the second is that the redemption came through Chilonim and not through Tzaddikim. The appropriate responses to those challenges are very important to be aware of. The first section in this chapter is Almut Mitale Geula, hiding from the process of redemption. As an introduction to this chapter, we will open a sefer and flip through it. It's written in our own time, that talks about everything that happened between Pesach and Shavuot. The sefer of its own is phenomenal, very well organized. It has 19 chapters that deal with everything that happened between Pesach and Shavuot. In the second Perek, we see a list of various things that occurred. And the author is very careful to note that on the 23rd of Nisan, in the year 2195, Levi ben Yaakov Avinu had his bris milah. Very important date. Because of that, some Hasidim don't say Tachnin on that date. As we flip through it again, we get through to the date of Hey Be'iyar, the 5th day of Iyar. Has something ever happened on this date special for the history of the Jewish people? Of course. In the book we read, in the year 5252, the order was given that the Jews of Spain had to leave Spain. That every Jew that did not leave the borders and did not change his religion to Catholicism would be killed. Did anything else occur on this date, the 5th of Iyar, other than the order for the expulsion of Spain? The book does not write a single thing. The book was published in Tafshin Mem Dalet, 1984. And other than this one incident of Hey Be'iyar, nothing seems to have happened. As we flip through the Sefer a little bit more, Bekaf Chet Be'iyar, in the year 2880, Shmuel Hanavi passed away in Mitzpeh. Did anything else occur?
Hello.
Did anything else?
Hi.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut out. Go ahead.
Did anything else occur on this date of the 28th of Iyar? Yes. He says that every year the Rambam made a Mishneh V'Simcha, like a Purim Suda, because he found a Sefer Torah that was written by Ezra HaSofer on this date. One can question that fact, because the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah writes that he was using a manuscript from the Ben Asher family from Tzfat, which we now know as the Leningrad Codex, as his authentic Tanakh. So to say that he had a Sefer Torah from Ezra HaSofer is slightly problematic. And if you would think about Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim on the 5th of Iyar and the 28th of Iyar, there is absolute ignorance of the fact that these things happened. If you go through the Sefer, you see that he talks about the minhag of not having haircuts, or when you're allowed to have haircuts during the Sfirat Omer. And he says anytime where a miracle occurred, that one is allowed to have a haircut on that day. And he brings, in the name of Rabbi Chaim, who was the chief rabbi of Morocco, in the Sefer Moed L'Kol Chai, which was written about 150 years ago, that in any place where the community establishes for itself a day of thanks for a nace that occurred for that community, they don't say Tachnun, and they're allowed to get haircuts on that date. And he talks about things that occurred in Izmir, which was the city where the Beis Yosef lived, between the time he was 8 years old and the time he made Aliyah. He was exiled from Spain when he was 8. In Turkey, and other places that have established such holidays. But he completely ignores everything that occurred within our own time, or within, for that matter, living memory. These two things that occurred between Pesach and Shavuot are completely ignored. To celebrate the 25th anniversary, the 25th Yom Ha'atzmaut of the State of Israel, Rabbi Professor Nachum Rockover published a sefer entitled Hilchot Yom Ha'atzmaut v'Yom Yerushalayim, the laws of Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim. In this sefer, he gathered every article, every psak halacha that was written by various rabbis from whatever outlook they be, from wherever they are, in Eretz Yisrael, from Chutz La'aretz, that relates to Yom Ha'atzmaut, relates halachically, not hashkafically, to Yom Ha'atzmaut. And in the introduction to the sefer, the author writes, this is source 2 on our sheet, Hakovet shel Pnenu hu hilchati. The collection that we have here is halachic in nature. Lo nichla'lu kan mamarim masot al arka shel tekumat Yisrael. We're not talking about essays or works on the value of the establishment of the state of Israel. Af lo nitbaru kan shelot komot shel medinat Yisrael behitgabshut chazon hagula. We did not also put here pieces, works that talk about the place of the state of Israel in the realization of the vision of redemption. The author intended to include within it halachic essays for and against Yom Ha'atzmaut. He did not give any personal opinion. The sefer, as I said, included the various approaches that were written about the establishment of the State of Israel, in fact. And from the dozens of essays that were published in the sefer, you do not find in the Jewish world, except for 3 essays alone, opposed to Yom Ha'atzmaut. In 25 years after the establishment of Israel, in the entire Jewish world, there was basically not a serious halachic negative reaction to the state of Israel. The 3 Piskei Din, the 3 halachic opinions opposed to the establishment of Israel, were all written in the United States. One of them was written as a response to an essay written by Rabbi Meshulam Rota that was published in Kol Mevaser, the first Chelik, chapter 21, that was a response to a question asked by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Maimon, who asked how we should halachically relate to the establishment of the State of Israel. Remember, Maimon was the first Secretary General of the Mizrahi. He was a member of the Vada Poel of the Yishuv, the executive committee of the Jewish community in Israel before the establishment of the state. and he was one of the Israel signers, signers of Israel's Declaration of Independence. He also was the cabinet minister in the first two governments. We have to say about Rav Meshulam Rota that he was known in his youth as Gaon Olam. His name was known throughout the world as the Ilui Mehorodka. And we talked about him in the introduction. In his response to Rav Maimon, he went through various issues in great depth and their halachic expressions. At the end of the second part of the Sefer of Rabbi Rackover, he brings a response to Rav Rota. And toward the end of the response, we read, source 3, Mimashik Tavtikan, what I have written here, Kemat al regel achat ubehilo mamash. It was written on one foot and in a great rush. Sivorni sheyesh bo dai lahochiach. I think that there's enough here to prove, ulafize, and according to this, bevadai da omro, that anyone that says it, meaning halal b'yom hatzmut, hu chas v'shalom mecharef u'megadev, he is God forbidding, blaspheming to God. In response to this response of Rav Meshulam Rota, someone else in America wrote a response, and he writes, Mitchila alai lomar, first I have to say, shebavati knisiot sheli, that in my shuls, lo amru hahalal ahem b'pekudati, they have not said halal based upon my instructions, ad sheyatilu aleinu gedolei Torah, until the great people of the Torah give us instructions on this. Nevertheless, he says, Chafatzti od laharich b'ma shekatav achar kach. I want to respond to what he wrote afterwards. Sheyesh lidchot l'dati, that it should be pushed aside according to my opinion. Aval roayan anochi ki besof hu kotev. The end I saw that he wrote, ki hu kotev al regel achat ubehilo ut mamish, that he wrote on one foot in a great rush. Umishum zei choshev ani she'eni kedai lepalpel b'devarav. And so I see that it's not worthwhile for me to delve into his words. Ki hu ba'atzmo kotev shekotev b'li iyun, because he said himself that he's writing without looking into the matter. Aval shal lecha yedidi al zeh, but I have a question to ask to you, my friend. V'kizehu derech lichtov psak halacha ulitfos. Is this the way to write a psak halacha and to print it? V'lifso halacha b'behilut, to print a psak halacha in rush. Ha'im zei chilul Hashem HaGadol. Is this not a chilul Hashem, a defamation of God's name, profanation of God's name? Umizei ba'atzmo yachol hu l'rod ki hayetzer gam ken notel chelko mizei v'ta'ut acher gorer tu'uyot. And he himself has made the Yetzer Hara a partner in this, and from one mistake draws after it another. V'ledugma, and for example, Eshalo, I will ask him, Im tshuva shektav Rav Rota lo haya kotva ela ha'admor misatmer shlita tzitzal. If the tshuva that was written by Rav Rota had not been written, if he had not been the author, but the Satmar Rebbe had been the author, Az haya kvodo gam ken kotevet tshuvato hazub b'prat al regel achat, would his honor have written his response on one foot? Avaksha lekabela tedvarim hanal. I ask him to accept these words above. Ki b'yedidu nemru v'lo lekanter, because I wrote them in friendship and not to make a fight. We see here that within the three halachic essays that were written against Yom HaTzmaut, that at least one of them was written al regel achat u'behilu mamish. It was written on one foot in great rush. This is not there is not a serious response to these issues. As I recall, there are 103 total tshuvot in the Sefer, and the vast majority of them were four. Some of them, I have to admit, were very weak in nature, but some, like Rav Shalom Maratha's, like Rav Herzog's, and so on, are very, very serious halachic works. And for the opposition to it, to write that it's just nothing, we don't have to give it any serious thought, is not taking the issue seriously. It's hiding oneself from what occurs before us. The next section, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'timhon levav, we say in the Vidui on Yom Kippur, for the sin that we sin before you with a wondrous heart. There is no doubt that one of the principal reasons why people hide their eyes and do not want to relate to the establishment of the State of Israel is that most of the leadership of the state, from its beginning, continuing today, are not connected to what we would call Shlumei Emunei Yisrael, people that are completely faithful in Israel. But they are what we call the Chilonim. The author of Em Habanim Smecha, Rabbi Yisahar Shlomo Tachtel, chapter 2, paragraph 12, wrote as follows. Remember, Rav Tachtel was coming from the Hungarian Haredi world, the world of Neturei Karta of the Satmar Rebbe, until in the Second World War, when he was under Nazi rule, hiding from the Nazis, literally at the point where he was hiding on the roof of a building that the Nazis were searching. It was a shul. The Nazis were searching for him in the building itself, not aware that there was a way to get to the roof, apparently. He and his family was on the roof. And while he was there, he had his insights and changed his opinion to Zionism. So he is writing in response to this very extreme viewpoint. And he writes as follows, source 1. V'yadati b'ni yadati, I know my son, I know. Ki tuksha lecha kushya gedola al devarenu, that you have a great question upon our words. Im kenhu, if it is so, she'abinyan shnase b'yamenu be'eretz ha'kedosha, usiman va'ot al kates shekarav lavo, that the construction that is done in our days in the Holy Land is a sign that the end is soon coming. Ve'atchala geula, and the beginning of the redemption. Eich yitachen shirov bonei haaretz hema ledove'enu mechalei shabsos va'ovrei avera. How is it that the people that build the land to our great difficulty and sadness violate Shabbos and do other averas, Rechmana litzlan? The kimat asher kegoyei haaretz hema ba'avanoseiha inu harabim, and they are almost like all the nations of the world in our great sins. Ve'ech yitachen sheborei kol olamim yasei atchala geula va'os siman al yedehem, and how could it be that the Creator of the worlds created the beginning of the redemption and a sign for the future redemption by their hands? Halo kai milan, do we not learn megalgalin zechus al yidei zakai, that something meritorious comes through someone meritorious? It is interesting to note, just as an aside, this Sefer was published in 1943 in Budapest. And the author used the phrase then, referring to modern political Zionism is the building up of the state of Israel as Atchalta de Geula, the beginning of the redemption. He was in the middle of the Holocaust. When he saw around him pain, suffering, degradation, death, the exact extreme opposite from what you would expect to see if you were seeing the beginning of the redemption. How is it possible that the redemption that we have been looking forward to for 2,000 years, that generations have dreamed of and prayed for, that it comes to be the realization of the prophecy of Yeshayahu, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, from Zion will come out Torah and the word of God from Yerushalayim, to all of the corners of the world. How is it possible that this redemption should be realized through people that are the exact opposite of this worldview? People that are attempting to remove themselves, to disconnect themselves from sanctity, from purity, and sometimes, not always, but there were times when they fought against the Torah and mitzvahs. So the author of the Ema B'nim Smecha continues and says, Ahuvi B'ni, my beloved, my son, Kushiyatcha Atsuma L'chora, your question seems to be a very great question. Aval Haskeit Ushma L'Devrai, but pay attention and listen to my words. Dabani, no, my son, Kimi Yamod Al Mifalot Tamim Deim, who is it can stand to know the actions of the perfect knowledge, meaning of God? V'hinei ze Elokei olam borei hakol. Is this not the God of the world who creates everything? Umito kol asher na'aseh ba'aretz. And from God comes everything that is done in the entire world. Ve'amku machshavotav. His thoughts are very deep. Mitzavev sivot v'gilgulim. He causes and brings things around. V'kosher nema b'nema. He ties string to string or hair to hair. Ad shitkaimu gzerotav. Lamata ba'olam hatachtam. Until his decrees are fulfilled in this, our world below. Who yodea umevin lama bachar davka be'elu lasot atchala degula. He, God alone, knows why he chose with these people to bring around the beginning of the redemption. The ot v'siman latova al yedehim, and a sign for the good that is going to come through their hands. The Ema B'nim Smecha is saying that we are not capable of understanding the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is above our understanding. We cannot attempt to run the world, run the matters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Holy One has his own calculations, his own way of bringing things, his own way of doing things, until he is able to come to the final purpose. Even though, according to our way of thinking, lo yitachein derech Hashem, that this is not fitting for the way of God. It is not fitting for the redemption to come through these people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nonetheless, has his own ways of dealing with things. As the Navi Yeshayahu says, Ki lo machshavotai machshavotechem, because my thoughts are not your thoughts. V'lo darchechem drachai, and your ways are not my ways. Neum Hashem affirms God. Ki gavu shemayim ma'aretz, as high as the heaven is over the earth. Ken gavu drachai midarchechem, so too my ways are higher than your ways. Umachshavotai mimachshavotechem, and my thoughts are higher than your thoughts. Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook taught, and it's found in Sichot Ritzia, the festivals, one about the Holocaust, the first talk, source 4. Ein levo b'kushiot u'tlunot al Ribono Shel Olam. One cannot come with questions and complaints against the Master of the world. B'yom HaKippurim anu omrim vidui al chet. On Yom Kippur we say our confession al chet, for this sin, for that sin. Hamsudar lefi seder ha'alef beit is said according to the order of the Aleph Beit, 2 statements for each letter. Hakolel hata'im shbein adam l'makom, bein adam l'chavero, that includes sins that are between man and God and between man and man. Hadavar ha'acharon she'anu mazkirinhu. The last thing we mention is al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'temehon levav, for the sin that we sinned against you with a wondrous heart. Mahriel Diskin Sha'al. Rav Diskin asked, Eze chet yesh b'temehon levav? What is the sin of wondering of the heart? Ha'im yesh eze lab? Is there some prohibition in the Torah? Or eze isur lihitpalei l'tumaho? Is there a prohibition to question, to wonder? Hu hishiv, and he asked, shechet ze shel temehon levav, that this sin of a wondrous heart, hu hachet hayoter chamor, it is the greatest of all sins. Si hachatayim, the apex of sins, litpalei al HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to wonder about God. Does God have this power or not? Yesh lefamim mitzavim b'chayei ha'adam. Sometimes there are situations in the life of man. Bem ein mevinim et hanhagah Elohimit. Sometimes we cannot understand how God conducts things. Va'az ba'im b'kushya v'tlunot al Ribono Shel Olam. Then we come with questions and problems, complaints against the Master of the world. Bikoret zu al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This examination of God, hu hachet hayoter gadol, this is the greatest sin. Hanovea mechoser amunah v'hashgacha elokit, that comes out of a lack of faith and in God and in divine providence. We cannot know the calculations and the plans of the Creator of the world. So therefore we should not sin with the wondering of heart. We cannot understand the depths of God's deeds and thoughts. Man sees with his eyes. However, the divine calculation is all-encompassing of much greater than the limitations of man. There is the measurement of God, and there is the measurement of man. Bahade kivsei Drukman lamalach. Gemara says in Brachot Yud Amud Aleph, why are you trying to figure out the calculations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The Rambam talks about this in Hilchot Tshuva, source 6. Adam she'avonotav merubim al zuchuyotav, a person whose sins are greater than his merits. Miyad hu meit barisho, he immediately dies in his evil. V'ken medina she'avonotav merubim, and so too, a country or a city that its sins are greater than its merits. Miyad hi ovedet, immediately will be lost. V'ken kol olam kulo, and so too the whole world. Im hayu avonotehem merubim misichluyotehem, if their sins are greater than their merits, miyad hem nishchatim, they are immediately destroyed. The Shak will say, in this calculation, eino lefi minyan hezechuyot v'avonot elu lefi godlam, it is not according to the number of merits and sins, but according to their greatness. Yesh zechut shi kneged kama avonot, there is sometimes a merit that is equal to many sins. V'yesh avon shu kneged kama zechuyot, and sometimes there is a sin that is greater, either equal or greater to many merits. Mitzvot. Ve'ein shoklin elu b'dat shel el deot, and these cannot be measured except by the knowledge of God, of knowledge. V'hu yodea heich orchin hazechuyot k'neged avonot. And he alone knows how to make the calculation of sins and demerits. We are not capable of measuring in this way. We don't know what one mitzvah and one avera means, how it looks, how it works, what its effects are. This is beyond our possibility of calculation. Rav Moshe Tzvi Neria, one of the Talmidim of Rav Kook, one of the editors of his writings, talks about one time shortly after the 1967 war, when he went to the Kotel and he saw Rabbi Rue there in the morning. Source 7, he writes, Kishehetzbati ala Kotel de'amarti, when I pointed to the Kotel and I said, this is Rav Neria, Im HaKadosh Baruch Hu hohil lahanik lanu matana kazot, if God has found it favorable to give us a gift like this, af al pi she'ein anu zakayim, even though we don't have the merits for it, hari yacholhu l'teit yoter v'yoter, he can give us more and more. He gave Rabbi Rue Levine, the tzaddik Yerushalmi, b'noam lachasho, he whispered in response, ein lehitbatei kach, one cannot express it in this way. Rak yachid r'shai lomar al atzmo she'einu zakai, only an individual can say, I do not have merits. Aval k'shemdvar al haklal, but when you're talking about the entirety of the Jewish people, aleinu l'dat, we must know, she'ein anu yodim klal la'arich et zechuyotav shel klal Yisrael, we do not know at all how to evaluate the merits of Klal Yisrael. This isn't just the outlook of Rabbi Rue Levine. This is his really an absolute Torah outlook. People would say it's Rav Kook's outlook, that you always look at the persons who are the best. It's not. It is the way that Torah looks at things. It's the way the Rambam says it. We do not know how to measure merits and demerits. How can we say what mitzvah has value and what mitzvah doesn't have value? What is the value of the different mitzvot? This is something that is impossible for us to calculate. We will continue with this chapter next week.